Okay, today we're going to be taking a look at a new watch from AVI-8. This is, I believe, their newest release. This is the Hawker Hurricane Bulman Edition. It's kind of a vintage-inspired quartz chronograph with a really cool multi-layered kind of cockpit-inspired design with a little bit of a distressed finish on parts of the dial. It's a really interesting dial, which you'll see as we get into the review. This is a watch that AVI-8 sent to me to review. I believe the intention is that I get to keep it, so I definitely appreciate that as well, but that's not going to affect my opinion of the watch or the review. So we'll get into that. We'll talk about some of the drawbacks to this watch as well as the positives. But overall, I've had the watch for about 2 weeks now, and I've been wearing it pretty regularly. And it's just a really fun, cool aviation-inspired watch. I think it's a little bit different take on the aviation watch than your typical traditional fliegers or pilot-style watches, as, again, we'll see as we get into the review. So enough talking about that. Let's go ahead and jump into it, take a look at it, and see what this watch is all about. If you're interested in purchasing this watch, there is a link below in the description, as well as a discount code that you can use to get a little bit of a discount on the watch. So with that said, let's take a look. All right, let's start by going over the dimensions and specifications of the watch. We have a 42 millimeter case diameter, lug to lug of 45 millimeter, lug width of 22 millimeter, and height of 13 millimeter, which includes a domed mineral crystal. I think this is a pretty good wearing size for an aviation style watch. It's not too huge, but definitely gives you some good wrist presence, and historically aviation pieces tend to be on the large side, so I think it fits well with the theme. You're getting a 50-meter water resistance, which again I think is completely appropriate for a watch like this. And then the watch includes a chronograph complication as well as a date complication. The movement inside is a Japanese quartz chronograph movement. I believe it's probably a Miyota movement, but I can't verify that for sure. It seems like your pretty standard chronograph movement. It's not like a mecha quartz or anything like that. I'm going to start by talking about the dial of this watch because I think that's really the star of the show. This watch it's the Hawker Hurricane Bulman Edition, and AVI-8, they name all of their watches after different aircrafts from different eras in aviation history. I think they're a British-based company, so the aircraft I believe are all British aircrafts. And the Hawker Hurricane line is named after a famous World War II aircraft, and so I think it's kind of their more vintage-inspired watch line. And you really get that feel as you're looking at the dial of this watch. The dial's a multi-layered dial, and it's got a lot going on. It's sort of hard to wrap your mind around everything that's happening there. But this particular one, I think it does a great job of sort of walking the line between legibility and sort of a lot of decoration and busyness. It's not like your traditional pilot's watch. You know, traditional pilot's watch is a tool watch. It's meant to emulate the watches that were actually worn by aviators in the past that were used for a very specific purpose. So they tend to be very plain, very legible, without a lot on the watch to sort of distract you or prevent you from being able to quickly tell the time. I think wearing a traditional aviation watch kind of makes you feel like you're a pilot, whereas wearing this Hawker Hurricane makes you feel like you're actually in the cockpit of an airplane. Everything about this watch is meant to evoke this sense of being in or around this vintage airplane. And it gives you a reminder of that plane or the feel of being in the plane every time you check the time. And I think that's a really cool take on the aviation watch. So anyways, let's see if we can wrap our minds around everything that's happening here. So this is, again, it's a multi-layered dial. So you kind of have two main segments of the watch. You have in the middle, going from left to right, this kind of bow tie raised portion that has this sort of distressed, scratched up look to it that kind of gives you this vintage look. And it's within that section that you get sort of the sandwich dial for the 2, 4, 8, and 10 indexes. And then on the top and bottom sections of the watch, you have this sort of sunk in black asphalt texture. And it's within these segments that you get the chronograph subdials that are designed to look like instrument gauges in an airplane. And you can instantly get that feel when you look at them. There's this really detailed molding and printing, and everything about them looks like an instrument dial on an aircraft. There's just so much depth throughout the dial, whether it's the instrument gauges that sort of rise up above the sunk-in section, or the index markers that are loomed that sort of jut out over that black section and raise above it, and then the sandwich cutouts on the sort of distressed bow tie section of the dial as well. Everything has a lot of depth to it that makes it really interesting to look at. At the bottom of the dial, you have the words Hawker Hurricane printed, and that again reminds you of the aircraft that inspired this watch. And if you don't know what a Hawker Hurricane is, AVI-8's got you covered, because they give you a really detailed engraving on the back of the case back that shows you a Hawker Hurricane. So you can always flip it over and look at the plane that inspired the aircraft, and I think that's a really cool touch to add to this one. So as busy as the dial is, and as much as going on there, they did a really good job, I think, of picking colors that are a little bit more muted. You've got a lot of like blacks and browns on this particular one, and that allows the indexes and the hands to really stand out, and you have really, I think, really clear printing on the dial, so it's extremely legible. Even though you have all of these different things going on, it's very easy to read the time. It's very easy to tell, even down to the seconds and the date and the chronograph seconds and minute. Everything is really legible, and so I think they did a great job of being able to cram so much detail and so many little flourishes onto the dial that again really give you this kind of cockpit feel, and still have a watch that maintains the legibility of most traditional aviation style pieces. The crystal is a domed mineral crystal, which again, I think it looks great kind of sitting above that detailed dial and gives some interesting distortion at the extreme angles of viewing the watch. The case is probably the least interesting part of the watch, and I think that's okay. I think having a dial that's this detailed and this interesting, it's better to have kind of a simple case that doesn't distract from that, and so the case design really lets the dial take center stage. But that said, the case is really well done. You have a nice curvature to the lugs that make it very comfortable to wear. And this particular model has a matte black PVD coating on it that is a really nice look to it. I think it looks really cool having that sort of matte black look. And this is the only watch that I have in my collection right now that has that kind of a coating on it. I do think that the crown and the chronograph pushers have kind of a more modern look to them that sort of clashes with the vintage feel of the rest of the watch. I would have preferred to see maybe like an onion style crown or something like that. But again, they're very simple and they kind of fade into the background. You don't tend to notice them. The crown does have the AVI-8 sort of target logo embossed on it, which is a nice touch there. And everything functions really well. I think the pushers could have benefited from having a little bit more tactile feedback when deploying them. You can't always tell when you've registered a good solid click or not. They can feel a little bit mushy. But I think for a chronograph in this price range, it's pretty standard. I think one of the most important things for an aviation watch is to have a good lume, and there is a lot of lume on this watch. The hour and minute hands are loomed, and with that kind of white lume paint, they contrast very well against the darker dial. The index markers around the edge of the watch are all loomed, so you have stick markers for all of the numerals except 12. At 12 o'clock you have your traditional triangle with 2 dots to help orient the watch at night. But that's less necessary because also at 2, 4, 8, and 10 you have a sandwich cutout that is also loomed on those Arabic numerals. And then you also have 4 additional dots cut out in that section of the dial that give extra little lume bits to it. So the lume looks really cool when it's all lit up. It's a very unique kind of lume profile. Unfortunately, the lume is not particularly bright, and it doesn't last particularly long. It's decent. It's completely functional. It's not dim by any means. It doesn't, immediately fade away, but it's not a particularly impressive lume. I would say that, after about an hour or so in a dark room, you start to have a difficult time reading it. But it's a very functional lume. But that's one area I could see where they might be able to improve upon. The strap is one of the best stock straps that I've come across. It's a really thick, genuine leather strap. The one on this model is sort of an olive green, a little bit of a distressed finish to it, but very vintage feel. But it feels very sturdy. It feels very thick, and it doesn't feel too soft, like it's going to wear out really quick, but at the same time it is very pliable, it's very comfortable, it conforms very quickly to the wrist, doesn't require a long break-in period. You get some really nice stitching on the strap as well that again help with that vintage feel of the watch. This one has matching black PVD hardware with a signed AVI-8 buckle. Yeah, and overall again one of the best stock straps I've come across on a watch. There are a couple of minor issues that I feel the watch could stand to make some improvements. As mentioned before, the Lume could be brighter and last longer. The chronograph pushers could have a little bit more tactile feedback. In addition to that, the movement is a little bit loud. It's certainly not like a Timex watch or anything like that, but I have noticed if I have the watch on at night and I'm in bed, if I put my arm a little bit close to my ear, I can start to hear the ticking, more so than other Quartz watches that I have. But that's the only time I've noticed it. So it's not like really loud, but it is something that is noticeable in a quiet room. And then the hands on the chronograph subdials, they seem to be misaligned by maybe like a half a second. It might just be me, but I feel like they're just slightly misaligned. I have gone through the calibration process to try and line it up better, but I still feel like they're just slightly off. So that might be an annoyance to some as well. But I feel like these issues are pretty minor and don't really detract from the overall look and feel of the watch. Price on this model, so it's coming in between $215 and $235. They have 3 different versions. 2 of them have a bead blasted silver colored stainless steel case. Those ones are the ones that'll run you $215. If you want the black PVD version, which is this one, that one runs at $235. And you can get that at the Spinnaker website. There is a 15% off coupon code that I'll have posted down in the description below, so you can take advantage of that if you're interested in purchasing this one. And I think that's a very fair price for what you're getting. Again, there's not a lot of aviation watches that are really doing this. AVI-8 really has kind of their own unique take on the aviation style watch. In this price range, you could also be looking at getting something like a Citizen Nighthawk or a Seiko Flightmaster, kind of, which are more in the tool watch category. But if you want something that, again, really has this vintage vibe and gives you this feel of being in the cockpit, this is a totally different style of watch, I feel like, than your traditional pilot's watch. And if that's what you want, if that's what you're after, getting it from AVI-8, I think is one of the few places, the few companies I've seen that's really doing these styles of pilot watches. And I think they give you a lot for your money in that price range. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. As always, if you did, please hit the like button and comment and subscribe. Love to hear what you guys think of this watch. Also, again, big thanks to AVI-8 for sending this piece out for review. I definitely appreciate the chance to get my hands on this and encourage you guys to check it out on their website. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next time.